The FIA did not just trigger another safety car debate. They may have turned Silverstone into the race that makes every driver question race control again. Because a safety car can erase a lead in seconds. It can destroy a strategy. It can hand one driver a chance and take another driver's race away without a single overtake. And when the decision looks controversial, the whole Grand Prix stops feeling like a race and starts feeling like an investigation. That is why teams and drivers are reacting so strongly. This is not happening in a vacuum. The source points to FIA investigations, a British Grand Prix grid penalty after investigation, curfew breaches avoiding punishment, and a Mercedes review request being accepted. That means the paddock was already comparing every penalty, every non-penalty, every review, and every explanation. Then Silverstone happened. Safety car chaos. A controversial FIA decision. Drivers demanding clarity. Teams questioning the process. And a race where the biggest talking point may no longer be who had the fastest car, but whether the rules were clear when everything mattered most. Because Formula One drivers can accept losing. They can accept bad luck. They can accept a safety car. But they cannot accept a race that feels decided by confusion. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Silverstone became so explosive, you have to understand what drivers actually fear when the safety car appears. It is not the safety car itself. Drivers know why it exists. They know it protects marshals. They know it protects stranded cars. They know it prevents one dangerous incident from becoming something worse. No serious Formula One driver wants a race to continue at full speed when people are exposed on track, when debris is scattered across the racing line, or when a recovery operation needs space. That part is not controversial. The controversy begins after the safety car is already out. Because once the race is neutralized, the question becomes, what happens next? And that question can change everything. A driver might have spent most of the race building a gap. Maybe he managed his tires perfectly. Maybe he obeyed every instruction. Maybe he kept the car clean, avoided trouble, and controlled the pace better than anyone else. From the outside, it looks like the result is coming toward him. Then the safety car appears. And the race he built begins to disappear. The gap is gone. The tires cool. The brakes cool. The field compresses. The driver behind is suddenly close enough to attack. A team that was nowhere near a podium may suddenly get a strategic chance. A driver who had no realistic path forward may suddenly be given one. That is the power of the safety car. It can take a race that was earned over many laps and compress it into a few moments of procedure, communication, and timing. That is why every word from race control matters. Not some words. Every word. Because teams are making decisions in seconds. Should they pit? Should they stay out? Should they protect track position? Should they gamble on fresh tires? Should they prepare for a restart? Should they assume the race might finish behind the safety car? Should they tell the driver to push tire temperature aggressively, or save the car and stay calm? Those decisions cannot be made in a fog. They need clear information. And that is where Silverstone became dangerous. The source points to an atmosphere where FIA decisions were already under the microscope. There were investigations. There was a British Grand Prix grid penalty after investigation. There were curfew breaches that avoided punishment. There was a Mercedes review request accepted. Each of those items may have its own explanation, and each may be defensible in isolation. But Formula One does not live in isolation. It lives in comparison. Teams compare everything. Drivers compare everything. Fans compare everything. If one situation leads to punishment, another similar-looking situation will be measured against it. If one breach avoids a penalty, rivals will remember. If one review is accepted, other teams will ask what that means for their own chances later. If one driver is summoned, every other driver watches the standard being set. That is how pressure builds around the FIA. Decision by decision. Explanation by explanation. Then a safety car controversy arrives at Silverstone, and suddenly the tension has somewhere to go. That is why the reaction becomes so strong. It is not only about one moment. It is about accumulated doubt. And accumulated doubt is far more dangerous than a single unpopular call. A single unpopular call can be debated and forgotten. But accumulated doubt changes the way the paddock sees every decision afterward. It makes teams suspicious before the explanation even arrives. It makes drivers question whether the standard will be the same for them. It makes fans assume controversy before the process is complete. That is what the FIA cannot afford. Because race control depends on trust, not popularity. Trust. Drivers do not need every decision to help them. They do not need every safety car to fall their way. They do not need luck to be fair, because racing luck never is. But they need the process to be fair. They need to believe that if the safety car changes the race, it changes it through a clear procedure. They need to believe that if a penalty is given, the reason is consistent. They need to believe that if a breach avoids punishment, the explanation is strong enough to withstand comparison. That belief is what keeps the sport from turning every decision into a war. At Silverstone, that belief was tested. And the reason drivers react so strongly is because they are the ones trapped inside the consequences. People watching from the outside can argue calmly. They can replay the incident. They can read the rulebook. They can compare timing screens. They can wait for statements. They can spend hours deciding whether the FIA was right or wrong. Drivers do not get that luxury in the moment. Inside the car, everything is immediate. They are managing the delta. They are keeping tire temperatures alive. They are listening to radio instructions. They are watching the lights on the safety car. They are asking whether lapped cars will be cleared. They are wondering if there will be a restart. They are checking the car behind. They are preparing for one possible race ending, while knowing race control may create another. That is mental pressure. And if the information feels unclear, the driver's entire race becomes unstable. Not because he lacks talent. Because the structure around him is uncertain. That is the part people often miss. Formula One drivers can handle chaos if the rules inside the chaos are clear. Rain, crashes, safety cars, red flags, tire gambles, strategy swings, those are all part of the sport. Drivers expect them. Teams plan for them. But they cannot plan properly if the procedure itself becomes the variable. That is when frustration turns into anger. A driver can lose a race because a safety car comes at the wrong time and still accept it, if the process is clean. It hurts, but it is racing. But if he loses because the timing, communication, or interpretation feels unclear, the anger becomes different. It becomes a question of legitimacy. Was the result earned? Was the procedure followed? Did every team understand the same thing at the same time? Did race control communicate quickly enough? Was the regulation applied as expected? That is what drivers and teams will ask. And those questions are powerful because they go beyond emotion. They attack the foundation of the result. That is why Silverstone was so dangerous for the FIA. The British Grand Prix is not a hidden race. It is one of the most visible stages in Formula One. It carries history, pressure, national pride, huge crowds, and a global audience ready to analyze everything. A controversy there does not stay small. It becomes a reference point. The next time there is a safety car, people will remember Silverstone. The next time there is an investigation, people will remember the grid penalty. The next time a team avoids punishment, people will remember the curfew breaches. The next time a review request is accepted, people will compare it to Mercedes and Monaco. Everything becomes connected. That is how Formula One debates work. One decision becomes the lens for the next decision. And if the FIA does not control that lens, the paddock will create its own. That is what drivers and teams do. They build patterns. They build arguments. They build pressure. They bring up previous rulings in briefings, in interviews, in private meetings, and sometimes directly to stewards. They do not forget because forgetting would be a competitive weakness. If one team thinks another team got away with something, it remembers. If one driver thinks another driver was treated differently, he remembers. If a safety car procedure hurts one team and helps another, both remember, but in different ways. That memory shapes the next controversy. And Silverstone gave everyone something to remember. Now, the responsible point is important. The source does not give a full safety car transcript. It does not give a verified list of every driver reaction. It does not provide direct quotes proving exactly what every team said after the incident. So the story should not invent details that are not there. But the source does show the context. The FIA was already surrounded by investigations and rulings. And in that context, a controversial safety car decision at Silverstone becomes much more explosive. Because controversy feeds on context. If the FIA had been completely invisible for weeks, one difficult safety car call might be treated as a hard racing decision. But when investigations, penalties, non-penalties, and review requests are already part of the recent conversation, the safety car chaos becomes another chapter in a bigger story. That bigger story is consistency. Are the rules being applied in a way drivers and teams can predict? That is the question. And predictability does not mean every incident gets the same punishment. Formula One is too complicated for that. A track limits breach is not the same as a curfew breach. A racing incident is not the same as ignoring flags. A procedural review is not the same as a live race management call. Context matters. But the reasoning must be stable. The logic must be visible. The threshold must be understandable. That is what drivers want. They want to know where the line is. They may not like the line. They may argue about it. They may test it. But they need to know it exists in the same place for everyone. If that line seems to move, anger becomes inevitable. And safety car situations make that anger sharper because the stakes are so immediate. A penalty after the race is frustrating. A review days later is political. A curfew decision may feel technical. But a safety car during the race is alive. It is happening while the result is still being formed. Every team is making choices based on race control signals. If those signals create confusion, the damage is instant. A pit stop can be made or missed. A tire choice can be right or wrong. A restart can be prepared for or misread. A podium can be won or lost. And when the race ends, the team cannot simply rewind the decision. That is why drivers react with fury. Because the consequence is irreversible. Once the checkered flag falls, the result has emotional weight. Even if explanations come later, the feeling remains. A driver who lost out still feels the race was taken. A team that made the wrong call based on unclear information still feels exposed. A rival that benefited still knows the result may be questioned. Nobody gets complete peace from confusion. That is the hidden damage of controversy. It does not only hurt the losers. It can also weaken the winners, because people debate the conditions of the result rather than the quality of the performance. That is bad for the sport. Formula One needs drama, but it needs clean drama. It needs strategy heartbreak, wheel-to-wheel battles, daring overtakes, tire gambles, and late race pressure. It does not need every major race ending with everyone opening the rulebook and asking whether the system worked. Because when the rulebook becomes the main character, the racing becomes secondary. That is the fear after Silverstone. And that is why the FIA has to respond with more than authority. Authority says, this is the decision. Clarity says, this is why the decision was made, this is the rule, this is the sequence, this is how it will be handled next time. Drivers and teams need the second one. They need clarity. Especially now. Because modern Formula One is too visible for vague explanations. Every onboard can be analyzed. Every radio message can be clipped. Every timing sequence can be compared. Every regulation can be quoted on social media within minutes. Every fan can become a detective. Every team can become a lawyer. The FIA cannot rely on the idea that people will simply accept a decision because it was issued by race control. That era is gone. Now, decisions have to survive scrutiny. And scrutiny after Silverstone will be intense. The teams will ask questions. Drivers will raise concerns. Analysts will compare the timing. Fans will debate whether the race was handled fairly. And every future safety car will carry the echo of this one. That is the cost of a controversial call. It creates a shadow. The next time the safety car is deployed, the shadow returns. Teams will ask for clarity immediately. Drivers will press their engineers for updates. Fans will watch the race control messages. Every delay will feel meaningful. Every instruction will be judged against Silverstone. That is the burden the FIA now carries. And the only way to reduce that burden is repetition. Clean procedure. Clear messages. Consistent rulings. Strong explanations. Not once. Repeatedly. Because trust is not rebuilt with one statement. It is rebuilt through behavior. Race after race. Incident after incident. Decision after decision. That is the first major lesson from the Silverstone drama. The FIA's biggest problem is not that a safety car changed the race. Safety cars always change races. The real problem is that the decision-making around the safety car made people question whether the process was clear enough when the stakes were highest. That is the dangerous part. Because once drivers and teams question the process, every future race becomes more volatile. A driver who already doubts race control is less likely to accept a painful call calmly. A team that already feels the standard is inconsistent is more likely to protest. A fanbase that already believes the FIA is unclear is more likely to see controversy in every gray area. This is how trust erodes. Slowly at first. Then suddenly. Silverstone may not be the cause of every FIA debate, but it can become the moment when the debate becomes impossible to ignore. That is why the reaction matters. Drivers and teams are not just upset because Silverstone was chaotic. They are reacting because Formula One depends on procedural trust, and the safety car is one of the most powerful procedural tools in the sport. If the safety car feels unpredictable, the whole race feels vulnerable. That cannot continue. The FIA has to make the next one cleaner. The next explanation stronger. The next penalty logic clearer. The next non-penalty easier to understand. The next review threshold more transparent. Because every ruling now carries the weight of everything that came before. And that is the final point of this first block. Silverstone was not just a race management controversy. It was a warning about accumulation. Investigations. Penalties. No penalties. Reviews. Safety car confusion. All of it stacks in the minds of drivers and teams. And once enough doubt stacks up, the paddock stops asking whether one call was right. It starts asking whether the system is stable. That is the question the FIA must answer now. Not with silence. Not with defensiveness. With clarity strong enough that the next time chaos arrives, the drivers know exactly who is in control.